So thank you so much to Dylan for opening our conference. At this time, we are delighted to invite to the stage our opening keynote. Melanie Hibbert is the director of IMATS, Instructional Media and Academic Technology Services, and the Sloat Media Center at Barnard College, Columbia University. Since joining Barnard in 2015, highlights include serving as co-interim dean of the Barnard Library and Academic Information Services, BLAIS, for 20 months during the pandemic, leading significant aspects of the shift to online learning for 3 and more semesters, serving as a key administrator for initial operations for the Sloat Media Center, Design Center, Makerspace, Computational Science Center, and the Movement Lab at the Milstein Center for Teaching and Learning. And currently, she is involved with a number of generative AI initiatives, task forces, and publications. Her video work has screened at places including the Harlem International Film Festival and the Center for Documentary Studies at Duke University. She has published in EDUCAUSE Review, the Journal of Adolescent and Adult Literacy, the Journal of Online Interactive Learning, and authored book chapters related to social presence in online environments, video production in after-school programs, and VR, AR, 360 media. Hibbert holds a doctorate in education, focusing on instructional technology and media from Teachers College, Columbia University. And with that, I'm very happy to turn it over to Melanie. So, pardon that this part will be slightly awkward. I think. And with that, we should be good. Oops, sorry, pardon. That we should get to.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, hi, everybody. Thanks for that lovely introduction. My name is Melanie Hibbert, and I just want to thank you all for inviting me here. And I especially want to thank Elisa Rod from McGill, but it is so wonderful to be here. Some of the questions and themes that I hope to talk about are about how emerging technologies can be applied to library collections and cultural archival materials, the ways in which library spaces can be an incubation and pilot space. I think one thing that is truly a gift working in higher ed and libraries is that we can have the freedom to try things, and maybe things don't necessarily work out. But often there's not the same constraints that one would have working at a company where you have to demonstrate profitability or other results. So that's one thing that is really, I think, wonderful about the places that we work. Another theme is collaboration and humility. Some of the affordances of emerging technologies, which I think are really exciting, and then a little bit more conceptual, but as we sort of grapple with generative AI, I think the importance and the relevancy of how libraries have contextual provenance of collections, and how I think that's just going to be increasingly important as AI becomes even more prevalent. So I just want to begin by stating my positionality. My visible identity is I'm a white woman. I'm also a mother. This is a photo of my daughter in the stripes, who is ice skating, and our family loves ice skating. And one thing I like about this photo is in the background, there is a Canadian flag and a US flag. And I'm very proud to say I'm a dual citizen of the United States and Canada. My mother is originally from Quanticook in Quebec, and 3 of my 4 grandparents are Quebecois. So I grew up in these states, but enjoyed sugar on snow from my grandparents. And I'm not just pandering to the crowd when I say Montreal is truly my favorite city. So I want to give a little bit of context to how I came into some of this work. So when I graduated from college, I was accepted into a program called the Alaska Teaching Fellows Program. I'm not sure if there's an analogous program in Canada, but it's similar to Teach for America, where people with college degrees are placed in high-need school districts where there's teacher shortages, where you don't have your teaching certification, and part of the program is you gain your certificate. And so I was accepted into this program, and was a teacher in this town of Mulatto, Alaska, which is a Koyukon Athabascan village located on the Yukon River. It's totally off the road system, so you have to get there by airplane. And, it was truly a remarkable place. There is a community where they didn't have electricity and phone lines until the 1970s. The elders in the community, their first language was Athabascan, which is, an oral language. And this is an image from stick dance, which is this really amazing ceremony that's potlatches and ceremonial singing and dancing that only takes place in two villages in the entire world, Mulatto and Kaltag, both Koyukon Athabascan villages. And so I feel like I was fortunate to experience this, and they still practice a lot of subsistence lifestyles. So salmon fishing. I joined a family to go salmon fishing on the Yukon and work in their smokehouse to create dried salmon. A lot of people still go moose hunting, trapping. At least when I was there, a lot of people still had dog teams. And so there's this interesting juxtaposition of different worlds. It was still very traditional in a lot of ways, but obviously there was a lot of things from the contemporary society there. So you kind of see these like really interesting juxtapositions of someone eating fish ice cream, which is a traditional meal, and drinking it with a Pepsi, or wearing feed and hatch from fur that they're a family member had trapped with native beading, and wearing that with a fox racing hoodie. So it's a really unique and interesting place. So I was a teacher in the high school which had about 30 students in the whole high school. It was a K-12 school, and I was teaching English, social studies. They told me, I think 2 days before school started, I was going to be teaching Alaskan studies. I was like, I just moved to Alaska. I don't know anything about this. But and I won't sugarcoat it. It was a hot mess when my first year. It was not, I didn't really know what I was doing. And it was pretty rough. And these are some photos of the students in 2006. One thing that was somewhat transformative was that my second year of teaching, the school received funding for technology, including a computer lab and digital cameras. And I found this to be a really great way to engage the students that I was working with. So we started doing projects with digital photography, with web publishing, with writing about images and publishing it. And I think there's complicated reasons why literacy in that community pose challenges. But one is just this is a community where there's no print in the village. The grandparents grew up speaking an oral language. So there's a lot of different barriers to overcome. But anyway, this was really transformative using technology. And one project that we worked on that was really wonderful was I worked with a member of the Jesuit clergy who had these archival photos from the village, mostly from the 1920s and 1930s. And I worked with the students around scanning some of these photos. They talked to their family to get some of the context. We had descriptions with the photos, but adding a little bit, kind of tagging the photos and adding metadata. Obviously, this was not up to Library of Congress standards or anything, but thinking about how do you describe this so that when people see it in the future, they have some kind of understanding of where this is coming from. And the project culminated in, we had a slideshow that was part of a larger event at the school that the students worked on, a digital slideshow. And then we also published, we scanned the photos, put them in a digital publishing software, and then had them published an analog. So it was sort of analog to digital to analog. And so, and I think these images, I have a lot more, but they're just stunning in my opinion, just so interesting and beautiful. But this led me to sort of more serious research questions about how technology can influence learning, how it can influence literacy. And that led me to graduate school at Columbia, where I still am a member, as a staff member. But there's something hopeful and inspiring, I think, about using technology to circulate images and re-engage with things in the past. And so that's just a theme that sort of followed me in work that I've been doing. So to switch gears, Barnard, very different context than rural Alaska. It is a college in New York City in Manhattan. It is a liberal arts undergraduate college that has about 3,000 students. And it's a historically women's college. And it is part of Columbia University-ish. So it's right next to Columbia, and we share a lot of licensing, and Barnard students can take classes at Columbia, and Columbia students can take classes at Barnard, but it is also separate in other ways as well. But, I personally like to think of it as a mutually beneficial relationship, but yeah, it is pretty unique. This is another image of Barnard, and that brown building opened in 2018, where myself and my colleagues work. And yes, but it's a small campus, very small urban campus. And then part of my portfolio is a media center and media services, which has a lot of different things: equipment room, studio, we do videography. And then I think likely most relevant to you all is, the academic technologies. So we work on the library technology stack. We just did a big project with the digital archives, moving to an open source platform, Archipelago. Currently, the Columbia ILS is migrating from Voyager to Folio, so we're really involved with that as well. And we do other things. And then I don't know, those of you that work in instructional applications and online technology, I think the COVID pandemic was something that we all experienced in very real ways with just the remote learning. But we also oversee Canvas and other instructional applications. And then the piece about emerging technologies, personally, I think is really valuable and really important to carve out space in technology, to have time to innovate and to test things. I think it's really hard it's easy when you're, especially in a services role, to get tied up in the day-to-day, and there's always something that you need to respond to. But I think it's really valuable and really important to have time to engage with different projects and different ideas that maybe are outside of the day-to-day. And also important to advocate to leadership around investing resources in these things. So yes, we do want to get the Apple Headset Pro, even if we don't exactly know what we're going to do with it. But yeah. And I just want to make a quick note of humility, which I briefly mentioned. I like to imagine I have humility, especially working with other communities like Indigenous communities, but 100% I have humility around technology. I know some things, but I definitely am not a software developer. So really defer to people in the community and that are on our teams who really are the experts, as I'm sure a lot of you are. So I'm going to talk about one project that we did with augmented reality, where we worked with dance archives and we worked with archives in the dance, creating an app and with a course. And so talk about humility. I really don't know much about dance. I've learned through osmosis and observation through my time at Barnard a few things. So Barnard has a nationally recognized dance department, and there's some really prominent alums like Twyla Tharp who have gone through Barnard. And I'm not going to read this whole wall of text, but there was a course taught by Professor Paul Scolari, who was partnering with a performance artist out of Wine Art. And they wanted students to create site-specific dance pieces, to choreograph site-specific dance pieces that were inspired and referential to Barnard archival dance photographs. So this was a project where we did have to outsource some of this. We didn't have the in-house knowledge, but we contracted a developer who worked with the open source dance tech app hosted by the Erasmus platform and created a Barnard augmented app. So what it allowed users to do was to scan archival photos that were placed around campus at this event, and that would pull up contemporary dance compositions in people's phones. And these are a few images of students dancing and of some of the images. And then, this is not the best image, but kind of shows, it was like, layering of dance pieces like on campus with the AR app. And I think what's really interesting and really powerful is that it is recirculating cultural artifacts in new and interesting ways. It's calling attention to a location, its histories, and other spaces real and imagined. It invited viewers to reflect on and interact with the history of Barnard College and thinking about, bringing to life these materials in new and interesting ways. So there are, of course, limits to these things. One thing from the faculty member and from the students we heard was when you're trying to conform an artwork to technology that creates limitations, like choreographing to a phone screen is a very different process than choreographing for a stage. And then just the user friction of creating an app like this, you're assuming people have smartphones, that they have internet access, and you have to download an app. And this was also something that, while there wasn't a formal evaluation, personally, I think it was successful, but, it was bounded very much in just sort of one class and one piece of time. But I think it was really interesting. The next project we're going to focus on is not bounded. It's still ongoing. And it is a project that we have called Digital Repatriations. And this is a project where we're working with a tribe on digitally repatriating some of the artifacts that are housed at the American Museum of Natural History. So the Picaris Pueblo is a tribe in New Mexico that is close to Taos, and there are a few hundred people there, and they were really involved in the Pueblo uprising in 1680 against the Spanish at the time. And there is a professor at Barnard who is a professor of archaeology and anthropology, Professor Seb Foles, who is originally from New Mexico and has a house there and has a longstanding relationship with the Picaris tribe, and also has a longstanding excavation and dig site at the tribe. So and he's done a lot of really interesting work around indigenous cosmopolitanism, so demonstrating the networks of exchange of ideas that were happening in pre-colonial eras. And these are some shards of Picaris pottery that were made during the 10th through the 12th centuries that were excavated from the dig site. And Sev, this is, of course, done in collaboration with the tribe and a lot of buy-in from them. So, and this is Richard Mamejo, who is a former governor and elder of the Picaris tribe, who is holding a shard of pottery that was excavated from the dig site that is there. So this excavation site is digging up shards There is also a significant Peakeries pottery collection that is housed at the American Museum of Natural History, which is in New York City. That is in the Spindon collection, which is named after Herbert Spindon, who was an anthropologist in the 1800s, early 1900s, who did a lot of collection work. And the tribe would like to repatriate the artifacts that are in that collection. And it's pottery, I would say, mostly from the 1800s. So more contemporary than the more recently. So I'm not clear on what the laws are in Canada, but in the United States, there was the NAGPRA Act was passed, which is the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. So NAGPRA states that Native American human remains, funerary, and sacred objects must be repatriated. But it's a little bit more complicated than that. If there are legal bills of sale, then it's not subject to NAGPRA. So the Peakeries pottery collection at AMNH isn't subject to NAGPRA because they do have the legal bills of sale from, I think, 1910 that Spindon had purchased from the tribe. The other thing is that the tribe itself, they're in the process of opening up a museum, but they themselves have said they don't feel prepared to have the correct storage facilities to house it, because if you preserve archival things, there are certain humidity controls and temperature controls that one would have. And so they also sort of are saying they're not quite ready to have them at this time, the physical objects. So to add another piece to this, Hewlett Packard, which is a computer and tech company, worked with Columbia University to provide funds and equipment for emerging technology projects, particularly around 3D scanning. But you had to apply. So Dr. Phillips and myself sent an application for 3D scanning. For 3D scanner and resources to 3D scan these artifacts. And again, this is the type of thing where collaboration is totally key. Nothing about us without us, working with the tribe this whole time, making sure this is something that they wanted to do. And we were fortunate to get accepted to the grant. And so Hewlett Packard gave us 3D scanning, computing resources, and some staff time. And this is a bit of a weird image, but this was in the media studio where we were testing the scanner and the software just to kind of get a sense of how the 3D scanning works. And we had I have this as a file, but it's okay. I need to click out. But Marco Kirkhellish, who is a senior software developer at Barnard, he took the 3D scans and created an app online that is it's able to have 3D rotational interaction, and so you can like shift rotate it. You can zoom in. You can really see the texture. It's pretty interesting. So we sort of had a proof of concept of, okay, we can scan things. You can take the scan, create it's not a one-to-one replica, of course, but you can have it exist in a digital sphere. And then COVID happened. So things kind of paused, these things like take a long time. And I would say the Natural History Museum was a bit more conservative about letting people in the museum when COVID, like kind of after COVID as well. So, sorry, I forgot to mention that we also have a relationship with the curators at AMNH who were open to the scanning. And so we had a proof of concept. This is a quote from Cecilia Tribes, who is the director of the Peakeries Pueblo Tribal Interpretive Center. And, talking about affordances of technology, and possibilities, which is cool. is we also talked with the tribe about if we have the 3D scans, like one thing is you can have a digital exhibit and put it online, but then another possibility is 3D printing from the scans and having replicas of the shards that then like visitors could actually touch and see. It's obviously different materials, but it's representative. And I don't want to speak for the tribe, but in conversations we had with them, they very much want to resist ideas of being in the past. They want to be, engaging with technology, and especially the elders really want the youth to be involved in a lot of these new technologies and trainings them to be leaders in that sense. And I'm not going to go too in depth, but there's this concept of the slipstream, which is a concept from the sort of influential work, Cluster on the Slipstream from 1978 by H.L. Visenor. But it's this idea of viewing time as past, present, and future flowing together, central to native epistemologies. And this is something that I've heard has resonated. This concept has resonated with Indigenous scholarship, and I think speaks to this kind of work as well with emerging technologies, is sort of engaging different time periods in together. So right, so we had this idea, got the resources, had a proof of concept. COVID happened, so things were on pause for quite a while. Then it picked back up where, and credit really goes to Dr. Foles in this, but he was able to coordinate a tribal delegation to come to New York that included tribal elders, a lot of the several youth to come, and they came to New York for a week. And this was kind of a continuation of this project. As part of their visit, they did wear ceremonial regalia and performed a dance on the steps of Low Library, and a lot of Columbia and Barnard leadership were there, and it was very cool. And part of the trip as well included taking the high school students to the Smithsonian collection at AMNH, so they got to actually see some of the artifacts in person. Although we still haven't been able to take in the scanning equipment yet, but sort of building that relationship in those ways. So, and while the youth were here, they were also able to, they weren't able to scan the actual spin-in collection yet, but they were able to use the 3D scanner to work with Peakery's artifacts that we had. So that was exciting. This is an image of that. And where we are now with that project is the Tribal Museum is starting to break ground. I know, what I've heard is that the New York trip has influenced some of their ideas around the museum. But the goal is that they will have a museum opening that will have these artifacts digitally represented. And so we're going to continue this, but I think one of the themes is projects can take a lot of time. I think when you have lots of collaborators and you're working with tribes, it's going to take longer than you think. And again, I don't know if this could have happened if I didn't work in a library or in higher ed, to say we have this idea that is maybe not super relevant to our exact collections, but it's working with faculty here that have this, and there's this need from this Indigenous community. And so again, it's something that I think is really inspiring and cool about working in libraries. There's raises a lot of ethical questions, as far as, so the museum is able to legally have these artifacts, but what are the ethics of this when the tribe is wanting to repatriate them? And I don't think anyone would claim that a digital representation or a 3D printed object is the same as having that artifact. But I think it is interesting and a bit of well, don't let perfection be the enemy of the good, as far as can we at least take steps, towards thinking about how these artifacts can exist within a community in different ways. I think another thing that's important is layering in technology and tools onto existing practices and traditions. And again, some of the affordances of technology. So I want to maybe talk, this is a little more questions. Any questions with more questions about generative AI, but I think that probably I'm not alone in that we're all sort of grappling with these questions. And another thing that's kind of exciting is I don't think there's like any experts right now in AI. Like we're all sort of figuring this out together in real time. But some of the things that I'm grappling with and thinking about, I have a lot of questions, but this is a image that was created from DALL-E 3 in ChatGPT, where I prompted it to generate an image of Picarese pottery from the 1800s. And this is what it created. Oh, and I meant to, sorry, let me pause here. I just want to go back and just show, forgot to mention this, at the picture of IMATS right here. To say, this is not where I actually work. I asked DALL-E 3 ChatGPT to generate an image of an undergraduate library that provides media and academic technology services. This is what it created. And I think with AI, there's sometimes glimmers of truth, but it also is hallucinating. So we do have tripods and we do have studio lights, but they're not hanging from the ceiling or in the middle of in the hallway. But we do have computers and nice lounge chairs. So anyway, so I find that so this image, there's echoes of truth. Like it does look like a pot, and I think the shape is correct, but it's totally not at all what would actually have been pottery that, for example, is collected in the Spinning collection. The shapes and the decorative designs, motifs, and colors are not, it's not what would be true. And this is an image from AMNH. It's Zuni pottery, but this is from the Special Collections AMNH. And so with AI, I wonder, so there's clearly biases in AI. These models are trained on existing data sets. And a concern I have is that AI is going to exacerbate existing inequities. So I think there's, a lot of reasons why this image was created, but like one thing that immediately comes to mind is that the knowledge base around Indigenous pottery from this time period is probably not very rich. It's probably not drawing from a lot of things, because that's like an area that has been under-described, and there's not a lot of, there's not a lot of scholarship, but there's gaps there in that knowledge. And so is AI going to further these divisions that we have in existing knowledge and existing data sets? Another question I'm thinking about is, what are some of the implications around context collapsing when there is no metadata or contextual provenance? Because AI, what it does is it deconstructs source materials and then reconstructs them. And so while imperfect, these artifacts are showing a year, who is the photographer. This doesn't actually have the information around what materials were used, but it has, an ID. There's metadata there, right? There's something, and this is what we as librarians, or what libraries do, is have these collections with very rich descriptors and collections. And again, while it's not necessarily perfect and the headings are not, there's biases there, at least you have an idea. So like, what does it mean when things like this are generated and you don't know where it's coming from or what it's thinking about? Another thing that is interesting is, considering how might AI impact forms of art that can't be digitized. So in the example of dance, like we did with the augmented reality, or with pottery, where we're doing this 3D scanning project, these are art forms that are constructed in socially embedded spaces, or it involves communion with people with objects. And so what does it mean when that's not something you can digitize or can put in AI? And I don't know, it could be something where there's a lot more value placed on these things, or there might also just be really interesting, exciting possibilities like the shards of pottery that the tribal governor was holding, that AI could be used to sort of reconstruct it in really interesting ways that are historically accurate. And again, just thinking about like what I think is the importance of libraries in AI and having a seat at the table, and thinking about how this technology is going to inform how we gain information, how we use information. So I know this is like, questions that have no answers that I'm just thinking about, but I'm just going to pause here and open up the floor for questions. But thank you all so much for letting me speak.
Sorry, I do have mics here. Just if you have a question, we'll put it over the mic just for. Yep.
Hi, I think one way that we can help with repatriation activities is maybe to help enable the museums, like the tribe that you're working with, to have the technology to preserve things in a long-term manner. Is there any plans to work with them on that sort of stuff?
Yes, the hope is that the Tribal Interpretive Center will have those facilities. I think it's just a question of, I don't know. I fully agree that should be the ultimate goal. But it's something that I'm like, that's unfortunately between the tribe and AMNH, and I don't know how I can personally affect change in that way, but I know that the tribe is hoping that in this new museum that will be a part of it. Yes.
Something that you said was a transaction protecting. I don't have the exact words, but the act that says if there's a business transaction, it's protected. There's a part of that. It's James Baldwin's way of I learned English at the auction block, and the disparity that comes in that if you have a business transaction, you can't do anything about it.
Yeah, that
is because I'm troubled by being protected because there's a business transaction.
Yeah, that is such a powerful quote from James Baldwin. I fully agree that it seems very arbitrary and very unethical to say because we have the bill of sale, thus we don't have to repatriate this. I will just say, I'm not an expert in NAGPRA or in some of the legal things around this, but I share the concern that why is that the decision maker. I also the other thing is I don't want to claim I'm an expert speaking on this, but I also imagine that the pottery doesn't necessarily meet the threshold of the funerary or sacred objects or human remains. I guess there's the way they classify it as certain things are repatriated and other things, if there's a legal bill of sale, that it's kept. But again, I don't know all of the details, but yes, it does seem like, wow, okay. There's a receipt from 100 years ago. Okay. All right.
Thank you so much for that talk. It was great. One of the parts that's really going around in my mind right now is how AI decontextualizes this past information. So the slipstream is disrupted, so to speak. And I suppose my question is, working with archival colleagues, what type of discussions have you heard around that? Because if I think of remix culture, for example, there's a certain knowledge and respect of the past that you have to know in order to remix to create the new thing. And that seems to be missing here. And there seems to be a role in terms of technology and digital trust and archives to provide that context for this new creation to occur. And I hope this isn't too broad, but just in your conversations or what you've observed, what type of talk is happening in that area?
Yes, and so this question speaks to me because it is something I've been thinking about a lot. And I don't know if you've read like Henry Jenkins' work on remix, but really personally impactful. This idea of like all culture is remix. But to your point, exactly, there is a lineage there. There is a reference point that you can speak to. And so what does it mean when AI totally upends that? I mean, as far as conversations happening, I mean, I've been talking a bit with just our director of archives about some of these things, and I think like we're all sort of grappling with it, like it's so new, and and I wish I had a better answer, but like I think it's really, I don't want to say like worrisome because we don't know, but like, what does it mean when, we'll just think about how, like, this may be like a bit of a tangent, but like, I don't know if any of you read Walter Benjamin's The Work of Art in the Age of AI, or The Work of Mechanical Reproduction. And this idea, so he wrote this in like the 1930s when the printing press had just come out, and he talks about how like the replica, the facsimile of the image doesn't have the same aura as being in the presence of a painting in real life. And I think if you take that idea and sort of follow it to a logical extension, it's like, well, that aura with digital photography has become even lighter. We all have phones that you can take a photo instantly and circulate in online spaces. And so like the levity is even lighter as far as the time to create it and the time to consume it. Like there's even less of a context in certain ways. But it's like AI, it's even one step further. Like if I don't even have to, if I ask AI to remix an image, which I was kind of playing with this actually, I took some, I don't know if any of you saw that like viral image of the Pope wearing Balenciaga that was created in Midjourney. So I took that image and I was remixing it in Dolly 3 and Firefly and saying like, can you remix this as a street photographer? As like a image of a street photography. And the images it was creating was really interesting. It was like black and white, like shallow depths of field, a different person, but wearing a cross. Like there were certain things that like were retained in the images, but it's like, at least with digital photography or like with your phone, like you have to be in a space. There is some kind of presence there and aura, but it's like with these remixing things, there's no lineage, there's no it's generated in like less than a second. So I think it's really interesting about how we consume images and art and how we create images and art. And again, why I think libraries are so important is sort of knowing where things come from. And I think AI is going to really disrupt a lot of that in ways that are, will be interesting to see. So anyway, I know that totally does not answer your question at all, but I'm very fascinated by this.
Hi. I think a lot of this discussion is for people who care about authenticity and this idea of authenticity and being related to an authentic object or writing, but like what happens when like people don't care? Because people don't care. Like, and people like the remakes for the remakes and
Yeah. I think that people don't care, but my personal opinion, what I see with what happened with big tech is I think it's been, obviously there's a lot of upsides, 100%, but there's been a lot of downstream impacts that I think we're just starting to understand now. I think that you look at the wealth created from tech companies in the span of time, and the only parallel industry that has the same amount of wealth created in that span of time is oil companies. And again, it's like oil has allowed for really amazing things like travel and shipping, but didn't know at first like what the release in the carbon of carbon in the atmosphere would do to our climate. And I know a lot of people also don't care about that, but and I think with big tech, like we're gonna understand down the road of like, wow, we unleash, there's a lot of downstream impacts that we didn't think about. Like, I think about like local newspapers, and that is an industry that is no longer viable because of the internet. And what does that mean for political engagement? What does it mean when our attention spans are kind of being fractioned away by TikTok and these other things that have kind of socially modified behavior? Anyway, I know I'm sort of talking all over the place, but I think that people might not care, but like when they realize like, oh, I don't have a job anymore because I wasn't paying attention to AI. No, I don't think that's actually gonna happen, but I do think AI is coming, it's like the internet. And so it is something to be thinking about and engaging with. But you also, you can't force people to care about things. I guess like to make the analogy of climate change, I think people do start to care when it personally impacts them. And I think AI will personally impact people. And I think in ways that might not even become clear until we're down the road. Just like I think just now we're understanding what are some of the impacts of big tech and social media and certain economies that it's really changed.
I have a question that might take it to a more positive place, maybe. I'm a former zines librarian and campus radio person. Barnard is a famous place for the zines collection. I'm wondering if you have thoughts about connecting technology and media like zines or even campus radio that help to empower diverse voices in a less diverse and more individual voices, including from marginalized communities.
Yeah, it's a great question. For those of you that don't know, Barnard has a really incredible zine library, and zines are kind of handmade like pamphlets or books, usually photocopied, and it has a lot of like lineage and punk and riot girl. And I would say Jenna Friedman, who's a zine librarian, is like, well, it's not obviously not a competition, and it's not necessarily the biggest zine library, but she will say it is the best described zine library because it has catalogs and metadata that go into the Columbia library system. But I mean, I think like the analog will always be there, like the face-to-face will always be important. Like I don't see it as necessarily like a competition of like digital versus analog. I don't know. I think that there's a lot of interesting applications that like AI and these new technologies can do to like help serve communities. I mean, I don't want to overstate things, but like I think this project with using 3D scanning with an Indigenous community, which has experienced like marginalization and a lot of social problems, for hundreds of years, like is an example of how you can use these tools to engage with these types of populations. And yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't really have a great answer, but I think that, yeah, I mean, technology is so broad in so many things. But I know personally, like Barnard, especially in the library, especially, is like very committed to serving marginalized communities and giving people, empowering people that have a voice and providing resources to students that need, like, free textbooks and things like that. So I don't know if that affirms and makes me kind of happy about where I am, but yeah, I don't know if there's like a follow-up or a better way I can speak to a specific project, but
I had a question about hardware itself because we interviewed students, employees to work in our library a few months ago. And it was sort of one of our leading questions. What's the technology that's captured your imagination? If you had unlimited money, what would you want to play with? And the Apple Vision Pro came back consistently among candidates. And in talking to one of them afterwards, it wasn't just the use of the technology, but actually cracking it open and seeing how stuff worked. And I don't know if in your work you've had a chance to introduce that layer of learning for people that were curious, if you have stuff that's sort of already broken that you put out for them to let them look and take some of the screws out or look at it, or if there's ever been a rule or a placement for that kind of learning on top of all the exposure that people have had with doing things with it.
That's a great question. I will say, for those of you that don't know, we have an Apple Vision Pro. We've tested it with a few applications, but we're still trying to understand like where it might be the best fit. And it's complicated because it is so expensive. You can't easily just get a 20 headset set for a class when they're, about $4,000 each. But for those of you who don't know, it says augmented reality headset that shows like a layer of AR over what you're seeing. What you're seeing isn't actually what you're seeing with your eyes. It's actually cameras that are filming outside and showing it back to you. So it's pretty mind blowing. That I would be scared to like break and look under the hood. But I mean, we definitely do workshops on like a lot of basic things, like basic programming and basic filmmaking. And we did like a series on like hacking hardware, like hack your, sometimes that term is a bit overused, but like hack your smartphone to be a media maker, that, so like adding different extensions and different like tools that you could add on. But I think that's a great idea. Like we haven't really, I want to say, actually, some of the camera workshops we've had, we will pass around like a broken lens or just something that we've deaccessioned to, kind of show like what is, f-stop or what's the aperture look like. But I think it's a great idea to have something that really takes apart some of the technology. I mean, I think the thing with AI that is interesting / scary is like it is very opaque in certain ways. And like I know we're like out of time, but I'll just end with this. I know like a lot of people talk about like digital natives, like young people that are just so fluent in technology because they've always grown up with it. But I actually find that that's not true. It's like making a big assumption. I actually find that people that are older, like myself, elder millennial, that were almost a little more tech savvy, because I grew up, having to like go on my Commodore 64 command prompt line to load Ducks Ahoy and like plugging in different hard drives, having the wire connect to AOL, the phone lines. And I think technology now is so out of the box. It's just an app that you open and it's not really, you don't really learn what's under the hood. And, but I think like trying to, and how do you engineer that? I think is a great question. Like, how do you teach that more? Yeah, that's a good question. Anyway, I think we're at time, but yes.
Yes, so thank you so much, Melanie. This has been a wonderful way to open the conference. So if we can all give just a round of applause, Melanie. And thanks to our audience for all your great questions. But I think, yes, with that, we will move to have a break. I have one point of business first, which is just that, like in years past for Access, we are hoping to record a lot of the conference and make it available on our YouTube channel afterwards. I think there was a permissions form that went around to presenters, but not everyone had a chance to fill it in. So for anyone who told me no, we will not share your presentation on YouTube, rest assured, via that form. But if you are still presenting, you didn't fill in the form and you would not like to be recorded, can you please come talk to me or send us an email to our Gmail account? We can also do a bit of this post-conference, but just wanted to put that out there. If you're okay with being recorded, then all's good. We're going to record you if you're good with that, but let me know if you want. And otherwise, I'm really happy to say that I believe there's an announcement of vitals outside right now, which I've been waiting months to tell everybody. So, enjoy. And we'll be back at 10:30. Thank you.